We're here with Walt Heyer, an author and speaker who formerly underwent a gender transition. Walt now says he regrets his gender transition, and he's here to tell us his story. Walt, what initially prompted you to obtain a gender transition?
Well, it started for me in 1944, 75 years ago. So my grandmother and I, we participated in her helping me cross-dress. She made me a purple dress. At the time, it seemed very benign. It seemed like a fun game. But what I have learned over the years is that when you take a young boy like I was at the age of 4, put him in a dress, and then start to Google and let's have fun around it, and affirm the kid like my grandmother did, tell me how cute I was. It's child abuse. And it's child abuse because you're telling that boy that there's something wrong with him as a boy and that he should be a girl. That's the message you're sending to young people like I was at the age of 4. So, it was tragic, actually, that she initiated, or I asked her to dress me, but we started off on this journey that's lasted now for 75 years.
And after, as you say, you started off on this journey, you obtained a gender transition. How old were you when you did this?
Well, you keep in mind, I started in the 40s, so there was not even any words like gender dysphoria, transition, or transgender. It wasn't until I was in my late 30s that I met a doctor who was a psychologist who approved people for the gender reassignment surgery. I told him my story about cross-dressing when I was 4 years old. He said, well, what you need to do is have hormone therapy and gender reassignment surgery, and that's the answer to all your problems that I'd been struggling with. So by age 42, I underwent gender reassignment surgery in 1983, and then lived as Laura Jensen, female, working for the Postal Service and for the Federal Deposit Insurance Company in San Francisco for almost 9 years until I detransitioned in January of 1990 after I discovered that people who identify as transgender or identify in a different gender struggle with gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder are actually suffering from some kind of psychological, emotional, sexual, or social issues.
Wow, that's a really compelling story. So now that you have transitioned back and you so now as you are living as a man, what would you say? Would you say that you regret your gender transition?
Well, what I regret most is that there are people out there that are lying about the fact that this is a good thing to do, that it's healthy to encourage people to change genders. It's healthy for a boy to dress up as a girl or a girl to dress up as a boy. It's not healthy at all. It's very destructive. That particular population of people who identify in a different gender are 18 times more likely to commit suicide than any other part of our population. So that can't be a good thing. The hormone therapy is damaging. The surgery is destructive. And in many cases, you just can't get back what was lost.
Tell us a little more about hormone therapy, because a lot of people talk about hormone therapy as a solution for young people who wish to gender transition, but they don't want to make a more pivotal step in obtaining a surgical gender transition. Is hormone therapy harmful for young people?
Yeah, they say that it's reversible. It's not. That's one of the big lies about it. The hormone blockers are very destructive. And, what it does, initially, it stunts their growth. You actually will stop growing at a natural rate. And keep in mind, the hormone blockers they're using were initially designed and made for kids whose puberty was growing too fast. They were on accelerated puberty in their growth. And so they came up with this medication to slow their puberty down. And that was okay to be used in that way. It was never, ever intended to be used to help kids transition or to identify in a different gender. So they're using the medication for what it was never intended to be used for. And for that reason, it's harming kids in the long run. Many of these kids don't realize it until 5 or 6 years after they start on the hormone blockers and then switch to cross-gender hormones. It's very destructive.
So in the cases of young people like James Younger, a child in Texas whose mother wanted to help him transition to become a girl, would you say that would be dangerous for James to obtain hormone therapy?
Well, absolutely. That's why I wrote 3 articles about it. That's why I went and met James at his house in Texas and spent time with him as I actually witnessed the fact that he doesn't even have gender dysphoria, number one. Number two, he never wanted to be a girl. This was his mother's idea. And the proof of the pudding is that today he goes to school as a boy, and that's because Dad has custody of him at this particular point. And so he was always a boy. It was Mom's idea to transition poor little James to Luna. That was just her idea. It wasn't James' idea at all.
So, Walt, why are people doing this? Why are people encouraging children to explore their gender and sexual identity?
I think it's just kind of a new age kind of thing that, there was a time not all that long ago, people were into goth. They had all these different things they were doing. But today we have parents who are wrongly encouraging their kids to change gender. They're going to pay a big price for it, too. To give you an example, one child that I know started with a parent's help at age 15, transitioning with hormone blockers. At age 18, he went to full reassignment surgery, genitals, breast, the whole thing. 1 year later, he contacted me. He said, I feel like a Frankenstein monster. Can you help me detransition? And his parents didn't want him to detransition because they were embarrassed and shocked about what had happened to their son. They thought they were doing the right thing. And so now they're helping him detransition. I've got so many of these cases. There was one group in Oregon, there were like 9 kids that went through this, and they suffered greatly from the surgery. One of them ended up in the hospital trying to commit suicide. So there's really nothing good about this, and I think it's more of a political play or some kind of social ideology. People think they're brilliant because they're encouraging kids to transition. It's total nonsense, and it's very destructive, and the consequences are going to be horrible, and we're going to see them probably 5 to 15 years from now, and they're going to say, yeah, Walt was right. He's a old curmudgeon guy, but he was right.
Well, Walt, you have said before, too, that you believe that affirming children in cross-dressing or exploring their sexual identity is child abuse. A lot of people might take issue with that. What would you tell people who say that this is not child abuse, but it's actually helping children explore their sexual identity or things that they might need to uncover at an early age?
Yeah, well, I tell them this. If it isn't child abuse, why is this population attempting suicide after the people are helping them transition? And this is factual data. And what we know from the people that I work with, from the ones I work with and actually have spoken with, they can go through 2, 3, 4, or 5 years and have, quote, what looks like success. But after 5 years, 6 years, 7 years down the road, these individuals want to detransition. They wish they'd never taken the hormones. They wished that the doctors never did what they did. And we're going to see more and more of this. I'm just sort of the light at the end of the tunnel that people are going to start seeing more and more of these cases. And I've written a large number of stories about it, especially in my book, Trans Life Survivors. It's a great book for people who don't think I'm telling the truth. You can go read the stories in the book yourself.
Well, Walt, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Anytime. Thank you.